welcome to Mr. Otter Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to paint this pine wreath with watercolors. This is a really fun project and it's really simple. I'll show you the basics of mixing these colors up and painting the branches, and then I'll show you how to kind of make a wreath using pine needles. So let's get started. All you need are basic watercolor supplies. You need watercolor paper, and I am using Mr. Otter Studio's watercolor paper. You can find this on Amazon, and there's hopefully it's restocked by the time I post this video. And you need a brush, paintbrush. This is a watercolor paintbrush, around 10, and it actually comes with this watercolor paper, which is nice. And watercolors. I'm just using a praying set. That's what I usually use. Some water, a paper towel for blotting your brush off, and then I'm actually going to be using a plate to trace the circle for my wreath. So just grab something round that you can trace. And you might need a pencil for that part, but that's pretty much all we need the pencil for. And let's get started. So grab 2 pieces of watercolor paper because we're gonna practice and then we'll paint the wreath. And this is usually how I like to set up my watercolors. If you're left-handed, then you probably just wanna set this up on the other side. I'm right-handed, so I just keep everything on this right side. So anyway, I think it's good before we start just to kind of look at, yours might look different than mine, and that's fine because look at all these different pine needles. You know, they can look very different, and they can be bright green or kind of a gray green. Okay, let's talk about the colors that we're gonna be using and let's mix them up. We're going to be using 2 colors, green and red. So the reason I love this palette is because we can get such a range of colors. I mean, we can make a brown using these 2 colors. We can make just this super bright green. We can make a cherry bright red, or we can mute it down a little bit and have more of like a burgundy or a maroon. So the first thing we're going to do is mix up a ton of green over here in our tray. So just drop some water in there and then add some color. Mix up more than you think you will need. So it's not fun to stop and remix when you're painting. And the green you use might be lighter than mine, or it might be darker than mine. That's totally fine. So this is the green right out of the tray. It's pretty bright. If we add a little bit of red to it, what it does is it starts to turn it into more of a neutral color. And it just takes that saturation of the green down a little bit, which I want to do. You might not, maybe you like that super bright green, but let me just kind of show you. That is now what it looks like. So this is the green right out of the palette. This is with some red. And now I'm gonna add a little bit more red because I want it to be just a tiny bit more muted. Okay, let's see what this looks like. There we go, that's a nice color. All right, now right here, we're going to mix up that same combination, except we're going to add more color, more green and more red. This is going to be the color that we're using for the branch. So the main part, that branch. We don't need as much of this color. And then just add a little red. And this actually makes a kind of a nice brown if you add enough red. Or you can just get a darker green, kind of like a grayer green, but I want more color in that. It's still too light. Sometimes it looks dark in your palette, and then when you paint it, it's like, you know, pretty bright. So that's a little bit darker. That's more like what we want. And then for the cherry, not cherry, I always say that. For the holly berries, my goodness, what season is it? My red has gotten contaminated with some other colors. So let's see if I can get it back to its original splendor. This is what it looks like right out of the tray. Pretty bright, which these 2 bright colors, it's almost too bright, right? I mean, unless you like it that way, and some artists use super bright colors, and that's fine. But if you want it to look more natural and a little bit more neutral, you can. What I like to do is dull one of the colors, like maybe the red or maybe the green, because this saturated red looks really nice next to these colors, I think. But you can add a little bit of green if you want to tone it down. I don't see a reason to tone it down. So we're going to just paint some pine branches really quick before we paint the wreath. And what we want to start with is just the main part of the branch. So we're just going to paint a line going straight up. And I've kind of used my darker color over there. Then we're gonna grab our other color, and this is the technique. So basically, I like to paint straight up and down when I do this, but I realized you can't see when I do that. So I'm gonna try my hardest to keep my arm not right over this, which may mean that I need to paint over to the side. So we're just painting some pine branches coming off of this. Some are going to be closer together, some are going to be further apart. And you might want to mix up the direction they're going in a little bit. One tip I can give you, and this should be pretty quick, you don't need to think too much about these branches. And when I say branches, I mean pine needles. So pretty simple. I'm just going to show you what I've seen a lot when people start painting like this. They'll have the branch, and then when they start painting the pine needles, they kind of do something like this. I just want to make sure you can see. So they'll do like it's kind of like the Charlie Brown Christmas tree right now, just pretty sad, but there are some pine trees that definitely do have branches this way. But if you want it to be more full, then you just come back in. And then these ones can just be a little bit more random and sporadic. Maybe have some going in different directions and not straight up. So if you painted it that way, don't worry, you can always go over and just add some more branches. And then let's just add another little branch kind of coming off to the side of this one. And let's go ahead and add some pine needles to it. So one really quick tip that I'm going to give you is when you're painting your pine needles, it's easier to get a point at the end if you pull up, as if you kind of lift off as you move away. So see how the point is at the top? But if I try to like get a point and then go down, you can. It's just a little bit harder and a little bit awkward. So for me, especially when I'm painting like this, I like to just paint towards the end of the pine needle. So like from the middle to the end. So let's go ahead and just drop some in here. And you might want to paint the branch a little bit thinner than I did. Okay, so that's the basic of these branches. And now let me just give you some tips for painting the holly berries. So if your branches are not as saturated, like you see how mine are kind of light, you might want to paint lighter holly berries or whatever you want to call them. Let's just put some like up over here. And when you paint them, let me just get some of the water off my brush. If you want it to look shiny, you just leave like a tiny little white area somewhere on it. It could be a dot, it could be almost like a little stripe, but doing that is just gonna make it look a little bit more juicy, I guess. And then if you want more of a brown stem, all you're going to do is mix a little bit more green with your red, and you can actually get kind of a nice brown color. And remember the holly berries, like however you attach them, there's probably like some weight on them. So let's just add one right here. And they don't have to be perfectly round. You know, they could be like whatever, like a kind of an oval shape. Okay, and that doesn't look great. Let me show you how that would look on the wreath. You know, you're just going to be connecting them kind of randomly around it. And you don't even have to add those. Grab your circle object, place it carefully. I need to be more careful with this. On your paper, wherever you want that wreath to be. It could be right in the middle, it could be lower, higher, and then just lightly trace it with your pencil. You don't want a really dark line right here. And now you're just going to define where the branches are coming off of it. And we're just going to draw some lines. And I also like to figure out where the branches are switching direction. So like if these were my branches and I'm really making a wreath, I probably want to switch the direction they're going in. And I have to do it, you know, on one of the edges. I couldn't do it right in the middle. You can. I don't know why, I just can't do it. So I'm just going to switch direction here, and then I'm going to switch the direction here. I'm just going to draw some straight, and some of mine might go straight across it like this, with another piece here. I'm just kind of imagining these branches. Let me zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. I'm just trying to imagine it like these are kind of wrapped around each other, making this wreath. And that might be a little too high off of it. So And once we get to this part right here, I forgot to switch directions, so I just kind of rewound and erased. Now we're gonna start going in this direction. And then just kind of look at it and bring any other branches you feel like need to come, they can cross over it, they can go through the middle. Any pieces you feel like you need to kind of bring off. This is a good time to look at it and just see if it feels balanced. And then what I like to do is take my eraser and just erase some of the circle lines because I just don't want it to be the focal point of this. Okay, once you have those drawn in, you're ready to paint the pine needles. And this is, I honestly feel like just put on some nice, relaxing music and just start painting. And I kind of like to go section by section. Since I'm right-handed, I like to start on the left side, but you can kind of move this around however you want. But I'm just gonna start on this left side, maybe top to bottom, and then just, you'll see me kind of moving my paper around. I definitely will speed it up. But what you wanna do is in each section, you're gonna take your darker green color and you're going to paint the branch first. So I'm just gonna do this little section right here, have a branch, and I'm gonna bring it all the way. Maybe let's do all of these. So I've just kind of painted that in, and now I'm gonna grab the lighter green, and I am kind of blotting it off. I don't want it to be, if it's too saturated on my brush, it's gonna be hard to get a point. And then I'm just gonna start painting those pine needles on. And again, if I didn't have to film this, I probably would be painting this with my hand right over it. But I just want you to see what I'm doing, and so I'm trying to paint from the side. So I did already film this once, and you couldn't see anything I was painting. So just start at the top of the branch and move your way down. It could be not as full as mine. You could have different colors of green in there if you want more of like a lime green. Let me just make sure you can see that. Okay. Okay, I'll zoom in on these next branches, and then I'm just gonna speed the rest of this up. I feel like you probably could do it at that point. You probably could do it at this point too. And if you're having a hard time with the branch, I would paint right above it, honestly. Like, keep your hand perpendicular to your paper. I feel like it makes for these more even lines. Okay, so this next part I'm gonna zoom in on just so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. So I've got my darker color, and I'm going to paint in the branch. Let's get that in there. And you can always change those. You don't have to keep the ones that you had before. I'm gonna grab my lighter green, and then I'm starting at the top of these, and I'm just gonna start putting those pine needles in. Just kind of thinking of the direction they're going. They're all kind of pointing towards the top of the branch. Okay. And even the part that's on the wreath still needs those pine needles. And if you start to get big puddles like that, you can just leave them, or you could blot your brush off and kind of soak it up. The key is just kind of keeping your brush going in the same direction. Okay, now this next part, seriously, I feel like I can't paint these pine needles very well in this, at an angle like this, but I'll keep trying. And feel free to move it around while you're painting. Okay, now what you want to do is just continue painting all of your pine needles all the way around. Once you've painted all your pine needles in, and be careful, I got some paint on my paper just because I got it on my finger and drug it around, so be a little bit more careful than I was Also, I feel like this branch right here, it just comes over so far that it's kind of throwing this off a little bit. And so I might add like another one that's coming out a little bit further over there, or just leave it, but I would be mindful of that. And when you're drawing your branches on, just try to keep it, you know, centered on your paper a little bit more than I did. And also, like in this area right here, I feel like we could definitely add another branch coming off. So make any changes you need to make. And then what we're gonna do is paint the holly berries on. And you can paint as many as you would like. And you don't even need to paint them if you don't want to. I just know that a lot of people like that contrast when you have like that nice cherry red complementary color next to the darker branches. So I'm just testing. If you see me reaching over, I'm just kind of testing my colors. I have a little bit too much green in the red, and so I'm just trying to, I'm actually going to mix it in this top part of my tray because I don't want any green on it. I just want it to be really bright. Okay. And then you can group them together in like 2s or 3s. There's not really a rule here. So, and they do not have to be round, remember. And they don't even have to have like that little highlight if you don't want to put that in there. So just kind of place them on there until it looks right. You do not even have to add these at all. And you can add just some little like red dots if you want to just add some smaller ones in some areas. This is your painting, so kind of do what you would like. And then for the stems, I'm just going to mix some green with my red down here so I have like a brown. And then I'm just going to add, it's just basically it's like a gray color. But I tested on my paper. I want to make sure it's not too dark because I don't want this to be a focal point at all. I just want some of these to kind of have a little bit of a stem that's bringing them back into the arrangement here. And remember, they definitely have a little weight, so you might not want to have just a straight line going out to them. So add more, add less, it's totally up to you at this point. And you are finished. So a lot of people like to use this and they'll write something inside of it. I feel like I need another branch right there. But anyway, I'm just gonna keep it like that. Here's this other example where I use darker, more saturated paint. So if you want yours to look more like this, just use a little bit of a darker color. My colors are just a little bit lighter and brighter here. So a lot of people use this, they'll put a word inside of it or another painting, or just leave it as it is. But I hope you learned how to paint pine needles, and I can't wait to see what you make out of this. Have a wonderful day.